Diana, a freelance journalist, was scribbling notes in the middle of a windswept, frigid field when her phone buzzed violently in her pocket. The name William, her stepfather, flashed on the screen, making her heart clench. "I sold the lake house," his cold, detached voice announced, as if he'd just dropped a bomb into her life. That house, the keeper of her memories with her mother, how could it vanish so easily? But something in William's tone sent a shiver down Diana's spine. He was hiding a secret far bigger than she could imagine. The lake house wasn't just a stopover for Diana between her far-flung travels, it was a piece of her soul left behind on that quiet shore. When William casually declared he'd sold it, as if a wave of his hand could erase everything, Diana felt a chill race down her spine. Not from the wind whipping across the field where she stood, but from the way his voice came through the phone, arrogant, smooth, yet laced with something that made her shudder. She closed her eyes, trying to block the flood of memories, but they came anyway, fierce and unrelenting, like waves crashing against the old wooden dock of her past. There, she'd once run across dew-soaked grass, clutching the string of a bright red kite her mother sent soaring into the deep blue sky. Her mother, with her gentle smile and eyes as bright as the lake at dawn, always said the house was her gift to Diana, a refuge for when the world out there grew too suffocating. On summer afternoons, the two of them would sit on the dock, feet dangling to touch the water, their laughter mingling with the cries of birds circling overhead. "You're everything to me," her mother had said, her voice warm like the embrace Diana could still feel every time she stepped through that weathered wooden door. But then her mother was gone, taken suddenly in a car accident Diana could never fully comprehend, leaving no goodbye. The lake house became the last thread tying her to her mother, a place where she could sit by the fireplace, listen to the crackling logs, and imagine her mother was still there, quietly watching over her. When Diana started her journalism career, she embraced a whirlwind life, endless trips from dusty streets to distant lands. But whenever exhaustion hit, she returned to that house. She'd once sat in the worn armchair, writing her first article, a story about lake dwellers surviving a flood season, her hands trembling with excitement, her heart swelling with pride at the thought of her mother smiling down on her words. The house wasn't just a retreat, it was a witness to her growth, from a dreamy girl to a fierce journalist. Every scratch on the wooden floor, every ray of sunlight slipping through the windowpanes told a story, of sleepless nights hunched over coffee, of friends gathered in raucous laughter, or of quiet moments alone, letting tears fall silently as she missed her mother. And now, William dared to say it no longer belonged to her. Diana stood in the field, her grip on the phone so tight her knuckles turned white, her breath righted as if it might burst from her chest. She could picture him, his smirk, his cold eyes, standing in front of the house, his grubby hands signing papers as if it were just some old junk to offload. But what made her tremble wasn't just anger, there was something in William's tone, an overconfidence, as if he knew more than she did. She wondered, was the house really his only target? Or was there a deeper secret buried within those wooden walls her mother had cherished? Sitting on a rock in the field, Diana let her mind drift back. She recalled her last time at the house, just before this trip. She'd stood on the dock, gazing at the still lake reflecting the moonlight, feeling as if her mother were whispering through the water, "Don't let anyone take what's yours." Those words echoed in her mind now, sharp and insistent. But then she jolted. If her mother had warned her in her imagination, could there truly be something more valuable than the house itself that she'd left behind? A thought flashed through her, making her heart pound, maybe a keepsake, a letter, or something hidden she'd never uncovered. The cold wind swept through, carrying dust and the chaos swirling in Diana's chest. She stood, wiping away a tear that had streaked down her cheek, her hand clenching as if to crush the pain. The lake house wasn't just a home, it was her heart, where her mother had poured her love and memories. William might think he'd won, that he could erase it from her life with a single signature, but he didn't grasp the power of what that house represented. Diana whispered to herself, her voice trembling yet resolute, "Mom left it to me, not you. I'll take it all back, no matter what it takes." A spark of determination flared in her eyes, but beneath it, a growing doubt took root. William wasn't a fool, his confidence couldn't stem solely from selling the house. She suddenly remembered the small safe in the bedroom her mother had once told her not to open yet before she passed. Back then, Diana had dismissed it as a cautious mother's instruction, but now it loomed like an unsolved riddle. Did William know about it? Was he after more than just the house, something bigger? Diana took a deep breath, anger and curiosity surging within her. She knew this fight wasn't just about keeping her home, it was about uncovering the secret her mother had kept hidden, a secret that could change everything. William wasn't just the man bold enough to touch Diana's lake house, he was a living nightmare, a wound that never stopped bleeding through all the years she'd been forced to call him stepfather. When his voice crackled through the phone, cold and triumphant with the words "I sold it," Diana felt a tidal wave surge in her chest, not just from the sheer audacity of his act, but from the way he'd always loomed in her life, a predator biding its time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Sitting in the field, the cold wind tousling her hair, she realized this confrontation wasn't just a single battle, it was the climax of a long simmering feud, where William relentlessly sought to strangle her with his manipulation. But what chilled her to the bone was the nagging feeling that he was playing a bigger game, one where she couldn't yet see the full board. The first time she met William, Diana was too young to see his true nature. He'd walked into their home with polished shoes, a cheap bouquet in hand, and honeyed words spilling from his mouth, making her think he might be a dependable man. But it didn't take long for her to realize he hadn't come to build anything, he was there to destroy. He turned peaceful evenings into fiery arguments, bellowing at her when she dared question the money vanishing from the family's shared account. "You're just a kid, stay out of grown-up business," he'd snarled, his eyes glinting with contempt. Diana learned to stay silent, shrinking like a small animal before a hunter, but each time, a quiet ember flared inside her, waiting for the day it would ignite. William wasn't just selfish, he thrived on deceit. He had a knack for turning words into weapons, making others doubt themselves. She remembered how he convinced her his week-long disappearances were due to busy work, while the stench of liquor and tobacco on his clothes told a different tale. As she grew up and started her journalism career, he shifted to mocking her dreams, calling her articles child's play and laughing loudly whenever she brought home a small award. "Who do you think you are, a real journalist with that brain of yours?" he'd sneered, his venomous tone aimed at piercing her self-worth. But now, as he dared to announce he'd sold the lake house, Diana no longer felt fear, only a blazing fury, like a fire that had smoldered too long finally breaking free. She rose from the field, her feet steadier than ever, though her heart still pounded with rage. William hadn't just taken something from her, he was trying to assert control, as if she were still the trembling 16-year-old cowering under his gaze. But this time, she caught an odd note in his voice over the phone, an overconfidence bordering on madness. "I used the money to buy a new car, you should thank me," he'd bragged, and it hit Diana that he wasn't acting on impulse. William was a gambler, but not a fool, he always had a backup plan, an escape route she couldn't yet see. She wondered, had he been plotting this for a while? Was there someone else behind him, a shadowy accomplice she didn't know? The more she thought, the more a cold dread seeped into her bones. William didn't act without a bigger payoff in mind. She recalled the times he'd made secretive calls in the corner of the house, his voice hushed as if afraid of being overheard, or the way he'd study her with probing eyes whenever she mentioned her plans. This time, his brazenness wasn't just a sudden strike, it felt like a calculated move, a trap he was certain she couldn't escape. She clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms, and pictured him sitting in his new car, laughing like a victor. But then a thought jolted her, if he was willing to go this far, was he after something beyond the house, something he believed would break her completely? The wind picked up, swirling dust and the chaos in Diana's mind. William wasn't just an enemy, he was a storm, a force that had roared through her life for too long. She couldn't let him keep winning, couldn't let him think he could trample her once more. But as she closed her eyes and took a deep breath to steady herself, a sharp question stabbed at her, why was he so certain? Did he hold some leverage over her, a secret she'd never suspected? Diana opened her eyes, her gaze hard as steel, and whispered, "Whatever you're hiding, William, I'll uncover it all. This is the last time you make me afraid." As the anger over William's brazen act still smoldered in Diana's chest, a sudden spark pierced through the storm of emotions. Jasmine, her best friend, the one person who could help her turn the tables. After the call from William, while Diana stood in the field with trembling hands and eyes blazing with resolve, she dialed Jasmine without a second thought. Jasmine's warm voice came through the line like a spring breeze in the dead of winter. "Diana, are you okay? I just heard something from a mutual friend, what's going on? In that moment, amid the chaos William had unleashed, Diana felt a new strength, not just her own, but the power of friendship, of an ally who'd stood by her through the darkest days. What she didn't expect, though, was that Jasmine held a secret potent enough to shatter William's every calculation, a revelation that would force them both to confront a horrifying truth. Jasmine wasn't just a friend, she was the sister life had gifted Diana. They'd met in a college journalism class, when Diana was still a shy student and Jasmine was the fearless one, always ready to charge ahead and pull her out of her shell. It was Jasmine who'd convinced Diana to go by the lake house 8 years ago, not just as a getaway but as a little fortress of their own, a place where they weathered failures together, pulled all-nighters chasing deadlines, and mended each other's broken hearts. You need a place to breathe, Diana, Jasmine had said, her eyes shining as they signed the co-ownership agreement, and I won't let you do it alone. Now, as Diana recounted William's declaration over the phone, her voice choking with rage, Jasmine didn't hesitate to cut in, he can't do that. Our contract is crystal clear, both of us have to agree to sell. Calm down, I'll check it out right now. Those words were an anchor, keeping Diana from being swept away by the tide of fury. But then, as Diana tried to take deep breaths to steady herself, Jasmine's voice dropped on the other end, as if she'd just seen a ghost. Diana, listen to this, she said, her tone trembling with a mix of shock and disbelief. I just got an email from the real estate company. William didn't just try to sell the house, he sent them a forged contract with my signature on it. Diana felt her blood freeze, as if the world had stopped spinning. She stammered, what? He forged your signature? Jasmine paused for a second, then continued, yeah. I never signed anything. He must have scanned it from an old document I sent you, probably from when we got insurance for the house. A jolt shot through Diana, not just from the horror but from a sudden surge of triumph. William had made a fatal mistake, and now she had the evidence to crush him. Diana's mind reeled as the gravity of this discovery sank in. Jasmine wasn't just an ally, she was the spark that would help her burn down the web of lies William had spun. They'd faced impossible challenges together before, like the time they nearly lost the house to a massive flood, spending 3 days in the rain patching the roof and digging drainage ditches, laughing through their exhaustion to keep their spirits up. Now, that unity became their greatest weapon. I'm scanning the forged contract right now, Jasmine said, her voice hardening. We'll send it to the police. This isn't just a contract breach, it's a crime. Diana let out a laugh, a mix of anger and exhilaration, as if she'd just glimpsed light at the end of the tunnel. Jasmine, you're a genius, she shouted into the phone, he won't see this coming. But as the excitement faded, a cold unease crept back into Diana's heart. If William dared to forge Jasmine's signature, he had to have a bigger reason than just selling the house for a car. She recalled the confidence in his voice, the way he'd smirked as if victory was assured. Jazz, she said, her voice softening, do you think he's hiding something else? I mean, forging a signature isn't small, he had to know it could blow up. Jasmine went quiet for a moment, then whispered, I've been wondering that too. What if he already contacted the buyer beforehand, promised them something to seal the deal fast? Maybe a bigger scheme? Diana's heart pounded. The thought hit her like a knife. What if William was working with someone powerful enough to make him this reckless? She stood tall in the field, the wind whipping her hair into a frenzy, but her gaze was now sharp as a blade. Jasmine hadn't just brought hope, she'd ignited a fighting spirit Diana didn't know she still had. They weren't just two friends, they were a small army, ready to take on whatever plot William was brewing. Send me everything you've got, Diana said, her voice like steel, we'll make him regret underestimating us. As she hung up, she looked up at the gray sky, a mix of rage and exhilaration surging through her. William might think he held the upper hand, but with Jasmine by her side and this forgery in their grasp, Diana knew the war was just beginning, and she wouldn't stop until she'd toppled his empire of lies completely. After Jasmine ignited the fighting spirit within Diana with her shocking discovery about William's actions, the two wasted no time. Diana stood in the field, the wind carrying the chill of the earth, but inside her burned a furnace, not just to protect the lake house, but to reduce William's every scheme to ashes. With Jasmine's razor-sharp evidence in hand, she knew this was no longer just a personal fight, it was a legal battle, one where she'd use the very system William always scorned to bind him tight. But as they sprang into action, another horrifying secret emerged from the shadows, revealing that William wasn't merely a con man, he was a monster in human skin, and this war would change Diana forever. Right after hanging up with Jasmine, Diana called a lawyer she'd once interviewed for an article on real estate lawsuits, a stern man named Daniel, with eyes like knives and a voice steady as stone. "Send me everything you've got," Daniel said over the phone. "If what you're saying is true, we won't just void the sale, we can haul this guy into court for fraud." Diana quickly forwarded Jasmine's email, the forged contract, William's smug texts, and notes about the suspected buyer. While waiting, she paced the field, her boots caked in mud, each step resounding like a war drum. She pictured William standing in the dock, his smirk wiped away, replaced by the panicked eyes of a man who knew he'd lost. The thought made her smile, a cold, cutting smile, sharp as a blade. Just a few hours later, Daniel called back, his voice now tinged with surprise. "Diana, I checked with the notary office. The contract isn't just forged, it was never officially registered. The buyer hasn't paid in full because they suspected the deal's legitimacy. We can stop it dead in its tracks." A rush of heat surged through Diana, as if a boulder had been lifted from her chest. "So the house is still mine?" she asked, her voice trembling with hope. "Exactly," Daniel replied, "but I'd advise you to go to the police. This isn't just a civil dispute, William's actions are criminal." Without hesitation, Diana nodded over the phone. "Do it. I want him to pay." As the call ended, she tilted her face to the sky, letting the wind carry away the sweat on her brow, feeling as if she'd just stepped through a door to freedom. The police moved fast once Diana sent them the evidence. An inspector named Carter, tall, with a voice like thunder, contacted her the next morning. "We've spoken to the buyer," he said. They admitted they had doubts from the start but were swayed by William's promise of a big profit. "We're expanding the investigation." Diana nodded, satisfaction swelling within her, but then Carter paused, his tone dropping. "There's something you need to know. We found something else when we dug into William's records." Diana frowned, her heart beating faster. "What?" she asked, her voice taut as a wire. Carter took a deep breath. "He tried accessing a secret bank account in your mother's name, tied to the house. It's got a hefty sum, about $50,000, that your mom left behind, but it can only be withdrawn if the house is legally sold." William knew about it. The world around Diana seemed to collapse in that instant. She sank onto the grass, clutching her head, her breaths coming in gasps as if she might suffocate. A secret account? $50,000? Her mother had never mentioned it, but then she recalled those times her mom gazed at her with distant eyes, saying, "One day you'll understand." Was this her mother's final gift, a safety net to shield her from hard times? And William, how long had he known? A wave of anguish crashed over her, not just from his betrayal but from the thought that he'd callously plundered her mother's legacy like a grave robber. She screamed into the field, her cry blending with the wind, raw with rage and helplessness. "He dared to touch my mother too." But then, amid that chaos, a new fire flared in her chest. This wasn't just fraud, it was a calculated assault, a plot William had nursed for years. She stood, wiping tears with a muddy sleeve, her eyes no longer trembling but hard as steel. "Carter," she said into the phone, her voice icy, "dig to the bottom of this. I want him locked up for everything he's done." Carter agreed, and as the call ended, Diana felt a strange power coursing through her, not just the power of justice, but the strength of a woman who'd found her reason to fight to the end. As dusk fell, painting the field in blazing orange, Diana stood silently, gazing at the horizon. The revelation about her mother's account wasn't just a painful twist, it was a gust fanning the flames of her resolve. William didn't just want the house, he wanted to steal the future her mother had quietly built for her. But he'd misjudged her, thinking she'd crumble. With the law in her hands and the truth as her weapon, Diana knew she wasn't just defending her present, she was reclaiming her past and her future. She whispered into the breeze, "Mom, I won't let him win." Never. After uncovering William's dark scheme and handing everything over to the law, Diana never expected he'd dare confront her face-to-face so soon. Just 2 days after her call with Inspector Carter, as she returned to her small apartment from a work trip, a knock rattled the door, urgent, heavy, like a hammer striking wood. She opened it, and there stood William, eyes bloodshot, teeth clenched, his rumpled suit reeking of stale liquor. He didn't wait for an invitation, barging in with muddy shoes marking her floor, his voice a guttural growl like a cornered beast. "You think you're so smart, Diana? Calling the cops, hiring a lawyer, you're ruining me." Facing him, Diana's heart pounded, not from fear, but from a pure, razor-sharp fury honed and ready. This wasn't just an argument, it was the final battle, where she'd reclaim everything he'd stolen, and an unexpected secret spilling from his own mouth would reveal that this war ran deeper than she'd ever imagined. William didn't come with remorse, he came to attack. He jabbed a finger in her face, his breath heavy with the stench of cheap booze. "You don't get how much I've sacrificed. I kept this family afloat while you ran around with your pointless little articles." Diana stood still, arms crossed, her cold gaze locked onto him. She was no longer the girl who'd cowered at his roars, now, she was a woman who knew her worth, and his arrogance brushed past her like a breeze against a rock. "Sacrificed," she replied, her voice calm but cutting like a blade. "Hawkins, you didn't do anything but spread chaos. The lake house is mine, and you had no right to touch it." William laughed, a harsh, twisted sound. "You think you can beat me with a few legal papers? I've survived worse than this." But then, just as Diana thought he'd only come to rant and threaten, William stepped closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You don't know everything, Diana. I was going to use the house money to pay off a debt that, if I don't settle, they'll come for you." Diana frowned, feeling as if she'd been doused with ice water. "Who's they?" she asked, her voice trembling not from fear but from a rising, dreadful instinct. William smirked, his eyes glinting with malice. "People who don't like waiting. I owe them from an old deal, one I signed using your name. If I don't pay, they'll knock on your door, not mine." His words detonated like a bomb in her mind, forcing her back a step, her hand gripping the table's edge for balance. She stared at him, breath ragged, her mind spinning with questions. What had he done with her name? An old deal? Was this a lie to scare her, or a horrific truth she'd never suspected? But then, amid the chaos, Diana realized something. Whether true or false, William was trying to break her with fear one last time. She took a deep breath, straightened up, her gaze no longer wavering but blazing like fire. "You think I'll be scared, William? You used my name, didn't you? Then let them come, I'll face them, just like I'm facing you right now. But you won't get out of this." Her voice was steel, each word a slash at his crumbling confidence. William recoiled, clearly unprepared for her response. He roared, slamming a fist on the table, making a small lamp tremble. "You'll regret this, Diana. You don't know what you're up against." But Diana stepped forward, now just a foot away, her voice no longer that of a victim but a warrior. "No, William, you're the one who doesn't know. I've got evidence, I've got the law, and I'll make you pay for everything, not just the house, but what you've done to my life." He stared at her, eyes wide as if realizing the prey he'd once dismissed had turned predator. But then, in a sudden twist, he laughed, a warped, almost manic sound. "You want to play big? Fine. But when they come for you, don't say I didn't warn you." He turned, heading for the door, but Diana wouldn't let him have the last word. "William," she called, her voice ringing like a verdict, "the next time you step through this door, it'll be in handcuffs. Get out, and don't come back." He froze for a second, his shoulders trembling, maybe with rage, maybe with fear, then stormed out, the door slamming shut behind him like a bell tolling the end of an era. Diana stood there, breathing hard, her heart thumping as if she'd just run through a battlefield. She leaned against the wall, her mind reeling with his threat. A debt? A deal in her name? Was it real, or just a desperate final jab? But whatever it was, one thing was certain: she wasn't afraid of him anymore. As her breathing steadied, Diana sank onto the sofa, her hands still trembling slightly but her gaze resolute. The confrontation wasn't just a war of words, it was the moment she severed the last thread William had used to bind her. He could threaten, he could roar, but he no longer had the power to make her bow. And whether the secret about the debt was true or not, Diana was ready, not just to protect her house, but to shield herself from any storm on the horizon. She whispered into the empty room, "This is the last time, William. Your game is over." After the door slammed shut behind William, leaving Diana in the quiet of her apartment with her heartbeat still echoing from the fierce confrontation, she knew the battle wasn't truly over, but victory was within reach. The days that followed whipped by like a whirlwind. The police swiftly wrapped up their investigation, confirming that the house sale wasn't just illegal but part of a broader web of William's deceit. He was arrested in a seedy bar, hands cuffed tightly behind his back, his wild eyes stripped of the arrogance of a man who once thought himself untouchable. The lake house was officially reaffirmed as Diana and Jasmine's, the legal papers signed anew under the bright light of justice. But for Diana, this triumph wasn't just about keeping a home, it was a gateway to a new version of herself, stronger, freer, and ready to face any lingering shadows from her past. When she stepped back into the lake house for the first time since it all unfolded, the fresh air flooded her lungs like a healing balm. The still lake mirrored a deep blue sky, and the cheerful chirping of birds in the towering pines sounded like a melody welcoming her home. Diana sat on the old dock, her bare feet dangling over the cool water, and for the first time in months, she let herself smile, not a defiant, victorious grin, but a gentle, profound one, as if she'd just rediscovered a lost piece of her soul. William's growls no longer echoed in her mind, his shadow no longer weighed on her shoulders. He'd lost, not just to the law, but to the will of a woman who'd learned to stand firm in a storm. This victory brought Diana a maturity she hadn't anticipated. Before, she'd often dodged conflict, letting William's small wounds fester quietly because she didn't want to shatter the fragile peace left in her life. But now, she understood that peace wasn't something to beg for, it was something to claim, to build from the wreckage. She was no longer just a journalist telling others stories, she'd become the hero of her own, with a sharper pen and a tougher heart. Each glance at the lake reflected a new Diana, no longer afraid, no longer doubting, but brimming with faith in her inner strength. Jasmine visited one weekend afternoon, bringing a bottle of wine and a radiant smile. They sat on the porch as the sunset painted the water gold, raising their glasses, not just to the house, but to a friendship that had weathered the storm, to the way they'd turned pain into power together. "You know," Jasmine said, her eyes sparkling, "I always knew you could do it. But seeing you now, I'm in awe of the Diana you've become." Diana smiled softly, setting her glass down and gazing at the lake. "I used to think losing the house would mean losing everything. Turns out, I found more, I found myself." As night fell, Diana stood alone on the dock, the evening breeze carrying the scent of pine. She closed her eyes, letting the stillness seep into every cell. William was now a distant memory, a costly lesson in never letting anyone define her worth. She opened her eyes, looking up at a star-filled sky, and whispered, "From now on, I live for me, no one can take that away again." The lake house wasn't just a place she returned to, it was a symbol of rebirth, where she'd learned to love herself and trust the path ahead. With each gentle wave lapping at the dock, Diana knew she was ready for whatever journey came next, no longer a victim but the master of her own fate. The story of Diana and her battle to reclaim the lake house conveys a profound lesson about resilience, self-respect, and the value of close relationships. For the elderly, the standout message is this: even as time dims physical strength, a steadfast will and the support of loved ones can still overcome adversity. Diana didn't bow to William but rose to defend her legacy, reminding us that age doesn't limit the ability to assert oneself. Cherish what matters in life, hold firm to personal boundaries, and trust in your inner strength. That's the way to live fully, no matter how many years pass.